hoping that this webinar will provide you with some opportunities that you can maybe act on actually right when we're done to help get animals back home faster. We have Amanda Foster, our Haas Director of Programs, and Nichole Hazard, our Associate Director of Marketing and Communications. And they're going to share what we've learned while working with some of our pilot partners over the last couple of years.
So we are going to talk today about part 2 of our intake triage work. If you tuned into part 1, the first couple of slides are going to be the same, but then it will be all new content from there. So just a brief history of why we are here talking about intake triage and lost pets today. So back in 2020, when this project started, we were trying to answer the question of why are pets entering animal shelters, and that took us down a pretty long road. It sounded like such a simple question to try to answer, but when we dug into it, it was actually pretty complicated. Go to the next slide. So we started by trying to answer this question by looking at reasons for intake that is captured in our shelter software systems typically as either an intake reason or a subtype. And what we found when we aggregated 13 organizations' data was that we just really couldn't answer the why behind why pets were coming in. You can hit the next button. And that led us down a road of really trying to transition our intake model from one that is more transactional to one that is more triaged and really get to the root cause of the complex human circumstances that are leading pets to our shelters. Next slide. And that is where the intake triage project started. We wanted to develop a framework to understand the complex circumstances that were bringing animals into shelters and identify where to focus programs and resources to help keep pets and people together. Next slide. And this project looked like two different focuses. We had our owner surrender focus, where we were looking at why people were bringing in their pets, either as owner surrenders or returned adoptions. And if you're interested in that content, it is in part 1. Today, we're going to be focused on a mini case study that we did around lost pet intake and gathering information at the point of intake for strays. And for that project, we worked with Lifeline Animal Project. These other shelters on the screen here also participated in this project, but only on the owner surrender and return side. And the reason that we wanted to do this project specifically with Lifeline Animal Project in DeKalb County is because they have such a huge stray intake population coming into their shelter. This is showing that pre-pandemic all the way to today, we are seeing that Lifeline in DeKalb County specifically is seeing a higher than national average for stray intake. Next slide. And particularly with stray dog intake. And so we thought that this would be a really great place to start. We're trying to answer that question of like, what can finders tell us? And how can we engage with finders in order to increase return to home outcomes and other positive outcomes? And so that's why we did this project with Lifeline and why we'll be talking about the Lifeline as a case study today. So the focus of our lost pet intake triage project was trying to answer these questions. What can we learn from finders of lost pets that can help us with making strategic decisions? What are the things that finders are reporting? Are we seeing physical identification on pets? Are finders willing to foster pets? And what kind of behaviors are they having in their community around attempting reunification when they find a lost pet? And so that's what we'll be focused on today. So some of the main findings that came out of this project, go ahead to the next one, was that many finders do not attempt any reunification method when bringing the pet to the shelter. The top 3 things that we were finding that finders of lost pets were doing was that they were looking around the area. They were posting on pet lost and found social media pages, but the top third reason what top third thing that people were doing was nothing. They were just picking up the pet and bringing it to the shelter. And so we have a really unique opportunity today with Nichole here to not only talk about like some of these findings, but what we might be able to do with these findings through like a Marcom lens. And so I'll pass it over to her.
Thanks, Amanda. So as she mentioned, we really want to be able to take these findings and put them into action. How do we apply the data that is coming out of the Intake Triage project and showcase that in a way that drives immediate impact for your shelter? And so all of the action items that we're going to be talking about today are strictly regarding communicating with your community. It's important to note that obviously we know every single community is different. You're going to have different value sets, different temperaments, different tonalities. And so please use these action items really as ideas for you to think about, reminders, especially because, you know, in animal welfare, we can kind of get a little bit boxed in for how we communicate with one another and how we communicate with the public. And we want to also ensure that, you know, all of these actions have resources on the Haas website as well. So should you need additional support for any of these items, you are more than welcome to reach out to the Haas team, as well as check out our Haas Resource Center for some of the additional items and templates that we'll be talking about today. So to begin with, as Amanda mentioned, these are the top 3 things that finders typically do. And so the action item that I'd love to discuss with you all today is really getting back to the basics. The number 1 core initiative, if I can drive anything home for you all, is to really understand the narrative that you are trying to overcome in your community. So my background is actually out of the animal welfare space. So I really like to talk with the Haas team about how does the average Joe understand what we are trying to say. And I will be honest in noting that before coming to animal welfare, I was definitely among those who would immediately, upon finding a stray or a lost pet that I did not recognize, think that the shelter is the safest place for this pet to be. And while I would look around my neighborhood, or I may, you know, knock on a few doors, definitely post on social media, when that solution wasn't virtually immediate, my solution was to take the pet to the shelter, not knowing that I may actually be taking the pet much farther than home, away from home, than it actually was. And so please understand that number 1, the mindset that your fellow neighbors have is the long said narrative that the animal shelter is the safest place for a lost pet to be. It is not the first instinct to be a finder and be the solution for the lost pet in need. The other narrative that you really want to try and overcome in this is that your community is not a part of the active solution, or rather the arms and legs of the animal shelter itself. One opportunity to really educate your community on seeing themselves as an extension of your work is to remember the basics. And what I mean by that is utilizing your communication tactics in a way that really connects with your audience exactly where they're at. So don't necessarily think that you have to come up with some huge giant campaign to get people to know what to do when they initially find a lost pet, but instead remind yourself and remind others that it really is the basics of understanding what to do upon finding a lost pet. So an example of that might be that if you were to translate it into a campaign, what do we all know what to do when there's a fire? You know to stop, drop, and roll. For this instance, you may come up with a campaign that is related to look, post, and host. and you teach your community what it means to connect with that campaign, remember the little catchphrase that's easy, concise, and clear to understand, and then that helps reinvent the narrative that they may already have in their brain. It's important also to take a campaign that's in something like look, post, and host and integrate it into multiple channels of communication. Animal welfare really loves to utilize Facebook or other social media platforms, and that's amazing. Continue to do so. But don't forget about the other forms of communication that are often just as helpful. I know here in Austin, where I'm based, we have seen really strong campaigns be utilized through simple means such as stickers, taking the stickers, putting them on community boards at coffee shops, connecting with local restaurants to see if they would be willing to allow you to put the sticker on their window. Another way is really simple signage throughout your city. That could be at the courthouse, that could be at your local YMCA, it could be at churches, but having those tangible take-home devices that communicate the same thing you're trying to communicate on social media goes just as far as posting on social media. Those high traffic areas with tangible takeaways is always something to remember to have in your back pocket. And so an integrated campaign that really exemplifies this is what Lifeline did. And Amanda, please feel free to chime in on any of this where I may miss it. But I really love this example. Major kudos to their team. They put together some really strong graphics to showcase what to do if you find a lost pet. What's really important about these specific pieces of communications materials is there's different means of access. So the one on the far left, you can obviously see there's a QR code involved. There's information explaining what it is you're trying to connect with, who the brand is behind the QR code, and where you can find the resources. It's very clear that this is a Lifeline initiative and how to connect regarding or utilizing rather the QR code itself. The other images on the right-hand side of your page are also really clear and concise, uses the power of data for the one in the middle to drive home the point that Atlanta is experiencing this issue and we want to be a part of the solution. So having a strong statistic and bringing that to life through a graphic like this is another really great form of communication to bring that action item to life. Then obviously the ones on the far right here, I cannot implore you enough to really consider having different languages for your communications materials. The Hispanic and Spanish speaking community is among the largest growing communities within our nation, and more the Spanish language is becoming closer and closer to being just as prevalent as English is throughout all 50 states. So really want to encourage you to consider having your even most basic communications materials translated into Spanish and posting those obviously in more prevalent Spanish speaking communities. And then lastly, having this text line is such a win for this team. I really appreciate the fact that it's clear and concise, and it allows you to have a direct line to what the resource actually is. Amanda, anything to add here?
Yeah, first of all, I love look, host, post. I feel like somebody should take that and run with it. That's awesome. But no, I think you covered most of it. That the only thing I'll add is the one in the middle that you all are seeing, the 63% of lost dogs in Atlanta were found less than a mile away from home. Lifeline got really creative with this. They were putting it up on signs at bus stops and bus stop sheltering so that people were seeing it when they were driving by, when they were using public transportation. And it was just, I thought that was a really great idea for getting it out into the community. And yeah, I love all of these that Lifeline made.
Amanda, can I jump in real quick?
Please.
Also thinking, it's lovely when you have a budget for bus signage, but when you don't, finding partners maybe to spread the word as well. And flyers, flyers still cost, but just getting the word out via flyers because not everybody is as techy as we all hope that they would be. But we do realize, right, budget can be a barrier on getting this out past our followers. So I think we go like, oh, I put it out, I talked about it, but talking about it in our newsletter or your social media is often you're telling the same people the same things. And so you really want them to, hopefully, those followers will share and spread, and maybe telling them to do so is really helpful as well. So finding some partners, doing just some grassroots marketing in your community with flyers, and then and if you have a great budget, do a little marketing campaign.
Yeah, we're actually going to get into all of those details as well to kind of give you specific tips and partners that you can utilize too for something like this.
All right, our next finding is sounds simple, but pets need visual IDs. There's a study that went out that Dr. Weiss did that showed that while 80% of owners agree it's very important for pets to wear ID tags, 67% don't even have a collar on. So there's this big disconnect between belief and behavior happening. So we also added this question to Lifeline's straight intake process so that the finders could tell us if there was a visual identification, harness, collar, etc. on the pet that they were bringing in. And what we found in DeKalb County is that 78% of those pets that were coming in had no identification whatsoever. That includes a collar, a harness, bandana, anything like that. So that's a big problem when we're trying to ask the community to be part of the solution getting pets home. We also need to be communicating that we need to give people the means to do that. So what are your thoughts on this, Nichole?
Absolutely. This actually points back to what Elke was just mentioning as well. We really want to do our best to break out of the echo chamber, making sure that we're not just talking to the same audiences over and over again, but really utilizing the data that we do have available to us to identify where the need is greatest and how we then communicate with those specific individuals. So firstly, I'd love to encourage all of us to thinking about breaking out of that echo chamber. While there isn't any one solution, again, coming from outside of the animal welfare world, I think that there is a really great opportunity to let go of some assumptions and remember that purely the basics of how to connect and build relationships with your community. You do that by letting go of jargon, trying our best to be the means of providing the resource versus expecting others to come to you. So a lot less asking or transactional type conversations and a lot more relationship building type of conversations. And you do that by really knowing and understanding your audience. Understanding your audience and their specific needs will allow you to not only meet the solutions that are, bringing pets into the shelter to begin with, but it'll allow you to do so in a proactive way and connect with the specific community that you may not have communicated with previously. An example of this is noting that individuals quite literally may not have the means to purchase a collar or know how to find ID and identification of any kind. In addition to that, microchipping is such a core solution within animal welfare, and it has worked wonders. And we are very pro microchipping over here at Haas. But in addition to that, we cannot forget about the starter level, which is being able to provide merely a collar and a tag for specific individuals. So the opportunity to do that is you can do so through a few means. Number one is really through partnerships. I know of many opportunities where you can connect with your local pet store. There are also larger brands such as PetSmart, Petco, etc., that would be willing to donate a large number of collars and identification tags for your shelter. That way, you are able to go out into the community yourself or have a specific spot on location where you are able to offer said donated supplies. In addition to that, one opportunity to kind of make the most if you do not have budget to go out and do these things is through an Amazon wish list campaign and making it very hyper specific to lost pet reunification efforts. So rather than having a giant list specifically for any sort of supply, you can do a designated campaign to ensure that all lost pets have a collar, and they're that much more likely to be reunited with their families in the event that they get lost through that initiative. So really being able to speak human and understanding where your humans are connecting with pets or the pet industry, your audiences, is where you should start. The other element that I really want to drive home here is the graphic on the right. The fact that 67% did not even have a collar shows us that there's an education portion that's needed. It can be done through really simple means, but it can also be done through really grand campaigns. So if you have to start small, that's totally okay. You can do so through your existing communication channels, but the best way to be able to connect with getting more collars on pets is through partnerships that provide the resources for you and getting them into the hands of your community yourselves. Anything else to add, Amanda?
Yeah, I would also say we can be part as shelters and rescues, we can be part of the solution here when pets leave our facilities too. And prioritizing, making sure that we're sending pets out with identification on. A lot of times we see that when you send a pet home with one of those donated collars that you got, that pet might keep that collar for years. So, really prioritizing making sure that we have ID tags and collars on pets as they are leaving is another really important piece of the puzzle here.
Mhm. And if you all need any support in kind of more of the details of how to build those partnerships and how to build those relationships for, really connecting with suppliers of those materials, getting materials, collars, ID tags donated to you, please feel free to check the resource center, and we'll also have the resource linked for you on how to build better partnerships after today's live event. The other thing, if you want to go really grand for ID tags, is I've even seen shelters have an engraver donated to their shelter so that even before the pet leaves, you can get the name and address on the animal before they even walk out the door.
All right, our next finding was that from the finder's perspective, the great majority of pets that were being brought in appeared to be healthy and friendly. And this was an important question to us because when we work with shelters, and I know my history in sheltering, sometimes we tend to like latch on to those negative experiences of or and tend to think that maybe all of the pets that are loose are either in danger or creating a dangerous situation. And while I don't want to pretend like that doesn't happen, because it definitely does, it was really interesting to see that from the person who's finding the lost pet, from their perspective, that the majority of the time the pets that they were bringing in appeared to be healthy and friendly. And the thing that is really important about this is when we're thinking about not having the shelter be a bottleneck to the pet's outcome. If we know that a lot of the pets that are coming in are healthy, friendly pets that are getting along with their finder, that they may also be eligible for foster placement either immediately or after a stray hold.
When we were looking at solutions for this particular statistic, I really saw this as an opportunity for recruitment of fosters and being able to grow your foster network. More and more, when we're seeing these, healthy, friendly pets coming into the shelter, they are going to be the more likely pets to be picked up and fostered by individuals who had never fostered before. And so, what I would love to encourage you all to do is think about finding a way to elevate your existing fostering program by ensuring that your new fosters and old fosters have the support of partnerships, meaning that you are able to provide them with a take-home kit or a starter kit that allows them to have the resources they need to take better care of the pet. That also really includes a basic, like, one sheet of instructions. And I know that that sounds probably even a little bit too basic, but I can't even begin to tell you how many fosters or new volunteers have specifically asked for almost like a checklist printed out that they can hold of what to do, what to expect, and how to get in contact with a representative at the shelter should they run into any challenges. And that is also a key point as well, is being accessible to your fosters, as well as any volunteer. We'll get into that in the next few slides as well, but I also just want to reiterate that with these pets being readily available to go into homes, we could showcase that through a already have a home campaign. One suggestion to do so is by looking at the mailboxes in your community and having posters or business cards or something tangible printed and posted on those mailboxes. That will also help your neighbors recognize that if they find a lost pet that appears to be healthy, friendly, maybe one of the pets that they might even recognize from their neighborhood, that they already have a home and they don't actually need to go to the shelter. So what could that individual who found the pet do after they find that lost pet? Well, through the Already Have a Home campaign initiative and having those printouts readily available, those instructions would be crystal clear on what you and your particular shelter could offer that individual finder while they care for that pet in the immediate, as we try and get them reunited with their families. The last thing I really want to drive home here, however, is the shelter doors are always going to remain open for pets in need. So this is especially important when you're communicating with your community, because we do not want to give the impression that we are pushing animals onto the community and that we don't have a responsibility to care for those animals in need. Of course we do, and we plan to bring them in and give them shelter, medical care, whatever it is. However, if there is an opportunity for those who are willing to be a part of our capacity for care and extend that reach, we want to be sure that they have the resources and the communication materials to do so. So please continue to drive home that the shelter is available to support those in need while the community and those who are willing continues to participate in the cause.
Speaking of fosters, we also found that 27% of finders were willing to foster the pet and be part of that reunification process. Some of them for 48 hours, some of them over a week, and 27%, so a little bit over 1 in 4 people. I ran the numbers on this before we hopped in here today, and we had collected data. We have collected data so far for a little over 8 months with Lifeline. And what this would have resulted in is over 440 pets not entering the shelter and not sitting in a kennel during their stray hold, but being able to go into a foster home immediately. And that's really exciting. That's a huge amount of the population that could be um, kept in a foster home in their own community and armed with the information and skills to help be part of the solution for getting those pets home. I also just want to plug that there is another stat that you've probably heard us talk about before, but Dr. Gunter had found that new fosters, so first-time fosters, are 4 times more likely to adopt than those that are fostering continuously with a shelter. So we'll get into that a little bit more in the next slide, but thinking about contingency plans for if a pet is not reunited, knowing that sending them home with somebody who's willing to care for them might also result in a positive outcome if a reclaim doesn't happen.
So
Other
this
thoughts,
is
Nicole?
really- Yeah, this is really an extension of what we were talking about, or a continuation of what we were talking about previously. If we have finders that are willing to care for those 440 animals, I mean, imagine you're in a room with 440 animals that could be out of your shelter. What do we need to do to connect them with fosters that are willing to take them in? Firstly, we want to make sure and audit, streamline, automate your communications materials related to fostering. Again, providing starter kits if that is available for your shelter to do, inclusive of a checklist or something really simple for your fosters to get started. We want to, through our communications, ensure that these new foster parents are excited to be a part of the solution, that they feel appreciated, that they feel like they are making a difference, not only for the animal in need, but for their entire community. And to do so, we want to make the process as painless as possible to get them, signed up, animal in hand, and taken care of throughout their fostering journey. Really want to also encourage the opportunity to create incentive. Whatever that incentive looks like for your shelter can obviously vary, but I have seen organizations do things such as raffles, do things such as fostering parent of the month programs where they, just showcase and brag on the foster that took in the most pets or had a really amazing story with the animal that they were fostering during that time. And creating that incentive and those check-in points from the shelter to the foster will continue to engage those new fosters and continue to build trust between your organization and those individuals. We don't want to hand an animal over and then they never hear from us again, right? We want to be able to continue to build those relationships through prioritizing touch points with the fosters, as well as creating incentive where possible. This is especially important because according to some new findings from nonprofit National, 67% of first-time volunteers, including those who are fostering, become donors. So while those donations may not be giant dollar amounts, every little bit I know would mean the world to each of our organizations. And so having that direct line from volunteer or foster to donor, that donor pipeline, will continue to allow your organization to have loyal advocates throughout your entire community, whether they're a one-time foster or a continuing foster. Lastly, and this is perhaps a little bit of a selfish plug, but I also really want to encourage investing in your marketing team. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have a staff of 10. That doesn't mean that you have to go crazy again with all of these campaigns. but it's really allowing your specific individuals on your staff to have the resources and the prioritization of storytelling at their disposal. So the basics of that really includes, having access to your shelter website and have it in working condition. That is something that you can do as a bare minimum tactic. In addition, you can ensure that if you do not have an on-staff marketing team, there are tons of opportunities to partner with your local universities. All communications, journalism and communications departments at each university that I know I have personally worked with, especially state-run universities, have a public relations, marketing, or communications branch of their university that actually enables students to take on clients pro bono and work for your organization during their semester. That includes creating entire campaigns, building websites, printing collateral for you, really building a partnership as if you were a marketing client of theirs. They do a fantastic job, so don't worry that it's students running your marketing if that's an opportunity you're willing to take a hold of. But it is a great way to do a lot with a little bit of budget.
I know Elkie put it in the chat, but does anyone here already do a Finder Foster type program like Wait 48, Take 48? If you do, please put it in the chat. I'd love to hear what you're calling it. In the meantime, we're going to talk a little bit about using our intake process to also find out if a finder is interested in adopting if a reclaim doesn't happen. So this question is verbatim what was on the questionnaire for lost pet finders, reiterating that it's the primary goal to return the pet to their original home, but knowing that stray intake is such a big portion of intake, not just for Lifeline, but across the country, and those pets tend to get stuck. We also wanted to know if there was interest so that we could streamline a positive outcome for those pets, especially those healthy, friendly, foster eligible, adoption eligible pets that are coming in as strays and not going home. And what this would have looked like. So if all of the people who had said yes had pets that were not reclaimed, that would have been over 355 pets that had an immediate outcome waiting for them if they didn't find their way back home. And I really love this question and asking this question just when we're thinking about not just lost pet reunification, but also pathway planning and thinking about how we can keep pets moving towards a positive outcome. And then also in line with speaking about asking people that are bringing in pets to be part of the solution. We already know that these people care when they pick up a stray or a lost pet and bring them to the shelter. So giving them the opportunity to say what they've learned about the pet can also be really beneficial for us if we're end up not being able to have that pet reclaimed, but want to know a little bit more about that pet for adoption profiles, foster pleas, adoption pleas. I know one of the things that we see that people really, really want to know when they come in to adopt a pet, especially a dog, as if they're good with other dogs, if they're good with cats, if they've ever been around kids. And so I went through and I pulled some of the quotes that we got. There was hundreds, but I thought that these really outlined that the people in the community, while they're having these experiences with these pets, sometimes maybe just for an hour in the car, maybe a whole week, as one of those could have been, that there's really valuable information that they learn as a part of that experience. And by having them be part of the storytelling, we can streamline those outcomes if the pet doesn't go home. So that was what I wanted to highlight here.
And I'll also reiterate, as Amanda mentioned, utilizing this as a storytelling tool is extremely impactful. If you're anything like me and you're buying something on Amazon, or you're looking for an Airbnb stay, or you're really doing anything, you're going to look at the reviews and what other people have said. One opportunity is to take these positive staycation reviews and make sure that they are posted and associated with the animal that you're trying to place into foster. You can also create an entire social media campaign that showcases animals available for foster utilizing these positive reviews. And I really appreciate what Amanda mentioned, in that so many of these hit home on the core elements that potential adopters or even fosters are looking for. So being able to pull out the ones that are really focused on, you know, being a solution to, and a matchmaking solution, that's going to be an opportunity for you to showcase that story. So feel free, again, if you need ideas or templates on how to maybe bring something like that to life, you can always reach out to me and our team.
Nicole had some really, she didn't say them here, so I'm going to say them. She had some really great ideas for what you could call that too. Do you want to share that?
Oh,
Nicole?
I said you could do like a rate my roomie type of campaign, or you could
Love
make
that.
it to be like, you create it, all you have to do is on Canva, which is free, utilize a template that looks like an Airbnb review. Obviously include the picture of the pet and copy paste that wonderful review that they actually received into that template. And I guarantee you would have a lot of engagement with something like that on social. And hopefully it would be a really great, not only storytelling, but recruitment tool for potential adopters or fosters.
I love that idea. So summarizing here, again, this is looking at responses from one specific community in DeKalb County, um, from Lifeline Animal Project, but this could be expanded anywhere. And we'll talk about some of the resources that you could use to see like what kind of questions were asked and how to gather that information here in a moment. But I'm just going to recap some of our shelter takeaways that you could take back to your organization. This is for the Intake Triage project as a whole, but thinking about this through the Lost Pet initiative, members of our communities have valuable information, so we need to move away from kind of that traditional transactional model of, all right, I found a lost dog, where did you get it? Hand me the leash and goodbye, thank you very much, to actually either having a conversation or creating a process where they can give us the information that we need on their own. So that's not taking staff time if staffing is an issue. And looking at like human circumstances leading to pets coming to the shelter are often complex. Most of the lost pets that we see or stray intakes are likely owned pets that are just not home, but being mindful of the complexities of human circumstances that lead to pets coming into the shelter. And again, that's kind of tying back to part one. If you want to check out a little bit more about that, using our forms and software efficiently. If you don't have a way to, or you don't know of a way to capture this type of information in your software system, definitely talk to your software representatives. We also have created forms that you can use to kind of like guide a conversation or to put out on your website or integrate into your intake process for finders to fill out information on their own. Using a conversational approach to your intake process wherever possible. So again, that's moving towards more of that like triage, mirroring human services type of intake process. Place emphasis on the finder's perspective. So as soon as a pet enters a shelter, as I'm sure that we've all heard many times, it's really stressful to enter a shelter as a pet that's never been in a shelter before. And so getting that information from the finder's perspective of what that pet was like outside of the shelter before they came in can be a really important part of our process. And it also gives us a chance to step away from some of our own internal biases that we might have as staff members when we first see that pet. And then be proactive, which is a lot of what Nichole has been able to share her expertise on today. But being really strategic about community messaging, increasing awareness, and breaking out of that echo chamber that we find ourselves in, like Nichole mentioned.
And don't forget, let's speak human to one another, everybody. We are always stuck in animal welfare speak, especially when we have been, in the game for a long time. And so these friendly reminders or summary points that I would love for you to leave with are just really basic. Know your own backyard. Don't make assumptions. Again, leave your bias at the door wherever possible, and utilize specific language that your neighborhood, your neighbors, the audiences that you're hoping to connect with, speak like they do. Make sure that you connect with them in a clear, concise way that they would find relatable, approachable, and accessible. You'll always want to utilize all channels of communication. Social media is a huge tool, but especially in communities that are rural or island communities, or communities in which multiple languages are spoken, you really want to ensure that you have multiple means and channels of communication. And when you do that, you will develop trust through those lines of communication, and also consider developing incentive, and building those relationships with your community wherever possible. You can do that through local partnerships. You can do that through providing incentive or providing specific resources should your budget allow to do so. But the main element that I really want to encourage is investing in your storytelling and your ability to market yourself as a resource center and an extension of your community versus the first and only line of defense for lost pets. And you can do so through these helpful tips. You'll also see on the side here just really basic ways to ensure that you're amplifying your mission and connecting with the individuals you really want to connect with. And that's by optimizing your existing channels, such as your website. Again, really understanding who you're speaking to or what audiences you want to break into, but also making sure that you are as accessible as possible. Sometimes it can be really intimidating for individuals to connect with animal shelters because they at times may feel a little bit behind in connecting with those communities or accessing them easily. So do your best where possible to make yourself as accessible as possible, and you'll have that much bigger of an impact.
And lastly, here is the QR code to some of the resources around the Intake Triage project. So in here, you can find some great training materials, short videos for staff, some information on collecting great information from your community, either through people who are surrendering or people who are finding lost pets and bringing them in, and really having a two-way conversation about the pets that are coming in and the experience of the person that is bringing that pet in so that we can be more integrated with our community. And then I know that we're running out of time, so we can go on to the next one. A huge thank you to the organizations that participated in this pilot, specifically Lifeline Animal Project today. Always great to work with them. And lastly, thank you to our sponsors and a few minutes here for questions. Also, I just have to say I love Straycation as a Finder to Foster program. For the person who put that in the chat, that's awesome. That's definitely the winner today.
Super cute. Okay, so right now, Can you clarify how you categorized a dog without a collar as a lost pet versus a stray? So I'm not sure if that was based on protocols at the shelter.
Yeah, so
How we define.
when I am saying lost pets, in this presentation, I'm using the interchangeably with stray. I don't know that that all of the pets were lost. We just know whether or not they came in with some kind of collar, ID, etc. But I do recognize that like true stray populations do exist in some of these communities.
That is it for now, but I'm going to give everyone a couple of minutes. There's nothing in the chat. Anything else come up? In the meantime, while we do that, I will share that our next Haas Leader webinar series participant is Lauren Rogers from San Diego Humane Society, who's going to be talking about self-supported, or geez, I always do that, supported self-rehoming at 2 o'clock next Thursday, 2 o'clock Eastern time next Thursday. Be on the lookout for those registration opportunities. From some of our surveying with our partners, we have seen that is an area that they might want a little bit of support on. So we hope that you spread the word on that and just kind of see what San Diego Humane has done over the past few years and the impact that's made through those platforms that some of us may or may not be using. And I don't see any additional questions, but thank you all, everyone, for coming. We appreciate you being here today and hope to see you next Thursday. Oh, hold on. One more.
Oh,
Have you had success with leave in place messaging? We have a large rural jurisdiction and see a lot of pets, not lost, but picked up. Sorry, my pups.
I do not have an example of that off the top of my head. I don't know if anybody else on this call does, or if does anybody else in the audience?
And if they do, throw your email in or say where you're from, and that might help Christina out. That would be great. And I do know there's some stuff happening in rural areas that we are working on as a national group. So that's a good thing to kind of keep in mind when we're talking about that. And then also, yes, and we are seeing this happen across the country where microchip readers are getting placed in fire stations, police departments. So that is definitely another angle. We I think just talked about opportunities, getting lost pets home, and what shelters can do, and that is definitely an idea. There are grant opportunities there sometimes for that, and Pollyanna is saying we have been funding microchip readers in the community centers. Yep, community centers, libraries. Sometime I think we've discussed that as well, or just stationary ones in parks in front of your building. So during off hours. So we're seeing this more and more happening. So if anyone is ever interested in that, please feel free to reach out to us and we can kind of point you in directions of shelters that are doing that work.
And I think that this is an awesome thing that we're seeing happen all over the place is these microchip readers. What I think is important is that we don't rely just on microchips because there could be difficulty with transportation to get to these microchip readers. The microchip themselves could be out of date. So while I think that this is great, it's also important that we're still messaging around the importance of physical identification from the ease of the finder's perspective, in being the solution to get pets home. So I think that they're both important pieces of the conversation.
And they're a little cheaper, those tags. Well, it depends on where you get them. But just a good old-fashioned name tag, right? Can get them home faster, probably.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate you being here today and have a great rest of your week.